You owe $100,000. HOA Karen crashed into my gas tank. I grabbed my shotgun, and then they blew up. The gravel of my driveway crunched under the weight of my boots as I walked the perimeter of my 3-acre property. My name is Marcus, and for 20 years, this land has been my sanctuary. I bought it long before the developers raised the forest next door to build Whispering Pines, a soulless subdivision of beige boxes ruled by a tyrannical homeowners association. I am a retired Marine and a former police K-9 handler. I value two things above all else: peace and order. Unfortunately, Susan, the newly elected HOA president, seemed determined to destroy both. Susan was a woman who wielded her clipboard like a sword and her prejudice like a shield. She hated that my property, which was legally separate and distinct from her HOA, bordered her manicured kingdom. She hated my wild grass. She hated my 2 retired German shepherds, Rex and Duke. But mostly, she hated that a black man lived on a larger, nicer plot of land than she did, and she couldn't control him. The war had been escalating for months, but on a humid Tuesday morning, Susan decided to go nuclear. It started with a certified letter taped to my front gate. It wasn't a warning this time. It was a ransom note disguised as a legal document. Notice of lien and seizure, it shouted in bold red font. The document claimed that through a loophole called constructive annexation, my property was now subject to HOA bylaws. It listed unpaid assessments, interest, and penalties totaling exactly $100,000. It was a fabrication, a fraudulent shakedown designed to bankrupt me. But the terrifying part was the bottom line. Failure to pay within 24 hours will result in the immediate seizure of assets to satisfy the debt. The asset in question was my restored 1969 Chevelle, parked in the driveway, which I had spent 5 years rebuilding. I ripped the letter in half, but I knew Susan well enough to know she wasn't bluffing. She was crazy. I didn't sleep that night. I sat on the porch with Rex and Duke, my Mossberg 590 shotgun leaning against the railing, watching the sunrise. At 8 a.m. sharp, the silence was shattered by the sound of engines. I stood up, adrenaline flooding my system. Rolling down the subdivision street was Susan's white SUV, followed closely by a flatbed tow truck. They weren't passing by. They turned onto my driveway, ignoring the no trespassing signs. My blood ran cold. This wasn't a fine. This was an armed robbery disguised as a repossession. Rex and Duke began to bark, a deep, guttural warning. I told the dogs to stay and grabbed the shotgun. I didn't rack it yet. I just held it across my chest, barrel pointed at the sky. The universal sign for "you are trespassing." I walked out to meet them. The convoy stopped just inside my gate. Susan jumped out of her SUV, waving a sheaf of papers, flanked by her husband, who was driving, and the tow truck driver. "Turn around," I bellowed, my voice cutting through the morning air. "This is private property. You have no jurisdiction here." Susan looked at the shotgun, then at me, and sneered. She didn't see a homeowner defending his land. She saw a thug with a gun. "Put that away, Marcus," she shrieked, her voice shrill and trembling with rage. "We have a lien. That car is ours now. We are seizing it to pay your debt. Load it up." She pointed at my Chevelle. The tow truck driver looked at the shotgun and stayed in his cab, locking the doors. But Susan's husband, trying to impress her, revved the engine of their SUV. "We're not scared of you," Susan yelled. "Drive around him, honey. Block the exit so he can't move the car." Her husband slammed on the gas. He swerved the SUV off the gravel driveway and onto the grass, trying to flank me. "Stop," I screamed, realizing what he was doing. "Don't drive there." The tank. My property ran on propane, and a massive 500-gallon tank was situated right next to the driveway, concealed by tall grass. I had marked it with flags, but Susan had torn them down weeks ago because they were ugly. The husband didn't listen. He floored it, the tires spinning on the wet grass. The heavy SUV fishtailed and slammed, rear first into the steel tank. Crunch. The sound of metal. Shearing was followed instantly by a deafening hiss. It sounded like a jet, engine starting up right in front of us. The impact had sheared the high-pressure valve clean off. "Gas!" I screamed, dropping the shotgun and sprinting backward. "Run! It's gonna blow." The husband scrambled out of the SUV, smelling the rotten egg stench of the propane cloud that was rapidly engulfing the vehicle. Susan stood there frozen, clutching her papers. "You broke my car." She screamed at me. Move. I tackled her, throwing us both into a drainage ditch just as the hot engine of the SUV ignited the gas cloud. Boom. The explosion was a physical blow, a concussive wave of heat and force that knocked the wind out of everyone. A massive fireball, orange and angry, erupted from the tank. It consumed the SUV instantly and sent a mushroom cloud of fire into the sky. The heat was intense, singing the hair on my arms. I looked up to see the fireball rising, the SUV burning fiercely in the center of the inferno. Debris rained down, pieces of the car, dirt, and burning grass. Call 911. I screamed at the tow truck driver, who was reversing down the street at 60 miles an hour to get away. I scrambled to my feet, checking Susan. She was covered in soot, her hair singed, staring at the burning wreckage of her car in shock. Sirens wailed in the distance. Sheriff Miller. He skidded into the driveway, followed by a fire truck. Miller jumped out, gun drawn, his eyes scanning the chaos. He saw the burning car, the shotgun lying in the grass, and Susan crawling out of the ditch. Marcus, Miller yelled. Status. No shooters. I yelled, hands up. Accident. They rammed my propane tank. The weapon is cold. Miller holstered his weapon and looked at the scene with disbelief. Firefighters rushed past him to foam the tank and the car. Susan staggered to her feet. Her pastel cardigan was ruined, and her face was black with soot. She spotted Miller and immediately pointed a shaking finger at me. Arrest him, she wheezed. He blew us up. He had a shotgun. He made us crash. Miller looked at the shotgun lying 20 feet away. He looked at the tire tracks in the grass leading straight to the tank. He walked over to Susan. Ma'am, Miller said, his voice dangerously calm. Did you try to drive off-road on private property to seize a vehicle without a court order? We have a lien. Susan insisted, waving a charred piece of paper. He owes us $100,000. He pulled a gun on me. Miller snatched the paper. Susan, this isn't a court order. This is a letter you typed. You can't just raid a man's house. That's armed robbery. He turned to her husband, who was shivering in shock. Did you drive the vehicle into the tank? She told me to. The husband cried. She said block him in. Miller turned back to Susan. You are under arrest, Miller said, pulling out his cuffs. For reckless endangerment, criminal trespass, arson, and attempted grand larceny. Arson, Susan shrieked as he spun her around. I didn't light the match. You lit the fuse when you came onto this property, lady, Miller said, cuffing her tight. The fallout was spectacular. The explosion made the national news. The lien was exposed as fraudulent. The HOA board, facing millions in liability for the destroyed tank and the environmental cleanup, dissolved Susan's presidency. Susan faced multiple felony charges and was forced to sell her home to pay the damages. As for me, I used the settlement money to buy a new truck and install a stronger gate. Rex, Duke, and I sat on the porch watching the repairs. The shotgun went back in the safe. The only thing that exploded that day was Susan's ego, and frankly, it was long overdue. Susan thought she could rob a Marine and steal his car, but she ended up blowing up her own ride instead. She lost her house, her freedom, and her dignity. If you loved seeing this greedy tyrant get a taste of instant fiery karma, smash that like button. And tell me in the comments, if someone tried to seize your car illegally, would you stand your ground like I did? Let's talk. Subscribe for more stories of ultimate justice.